Guys, I totally forgot about the option of a video lecture. So let's cover the end of the Peloponnesian War today, and that leaves us more time for reviewing on Friday and Monday. Woohoo! Before we do, a couple of notes. First of all, the pretest is still tomorrow. Study hard, but don't forget it's low stakes and I'm grading generously, okay? This is not to stress you out, it's to help you prepare, to make sure the stuff gets in um, at a normal pace, at a regular pace, a little bit over time rather than cramming all at last minute. Uh, to add to that, I am going to take the Peloponnesian War off of the pretest tomorrow, except what is included in the life of Pericles, which is really the lead up to the outbreak of the Peloponnesian War. So anything that's included in his biography is still fair game. Go ahead and give your thesis statements to my sub today. Remember, turning them in, completion grade, you're fine. I'll read over them and let you know by Friday whether or not you need any changes. Things were looking good from the ones I've already looked at. And the real test, which will definitely include the Peloponnesian War, is next Tuesday. With that out of the way, let's get started. This last part of the Peloponnesian War we call the Ionian and Decelean phase. We call it Ionian because so much of the action takes place over there. We call it Decelean because of a crucial fortification that the Spartans built in Attica. There it is, North Attica. Okay, see it just above the population growth of the city there. You see, while Alcibiades had been called back to Athens when he was out trying to run the Sicilian campaign, he actually didn't go to the court. As I said in class yesterday, he ran for it, and the place he ran was Sparta. While he was there, living the Spartan life with the royal family and getting cozy with the Spartan queen, he convinced the Spartans that their best bet at defeating the Athenians was to create a fortification, an outpost. We also would call a forward base. Okay, a forward base. This is very similar to what the Athenians did earlier in Sphacteria near the city of Pylos when they built a garrison there and invited the Helots to come flee for their freedom. Well, the Spartans now followed suit, and in 413, only shortly after Alcibiades had been recalled, they show up in Attica once more and rebuild the fortification. The most important thing this did was, of course, prevent any Athenian movement outside the city, but it also prevented access to the Larium mines, the big silver mine that had been discovered down there in the southern tip of Attica. So this was indeed a major hardship on the Athenians. One may ask why the war didn't end immediately. How could it go on for another 9 years? Glad you asked. The Athenians had wisely placed 100 triremes on reserve. They had kept these back at the Sicilian campaign, and when all of their ships sunk in this harbor of Syracuse, they had these 100 ships to work with. Now, granted, it's not as big a fleet as they used to have, but it's enough to keep some of the ally money come running in. And you may have seen this one before. Timing is indeed everything. Yes, timing is everything. In the same way that Nicias was too slow to act, the Persians were too slow to make good on the promises that they had made to the Peloponnesians to offer help. They were hoping, that the Persians would come forth with money so that they could build up a huge navy. They were also hoping that Corinth and Syracuse would send a bunch of ships and that they could sail over and basically take Athens real quick. See you later, man. But nobody acted quick enough. Everybody was still licking their wounds, and Persia was still hemming and hawing. So nothing happened and gave the Athenians some time to repair and rebuild. And, most interesting of all, this guy shows up again. Now, after the collapse in Sicily, the element of society in Athens that was opposed to democracy, remember they're always there, okay? Remember there are communists and socialists, there are neo-Nazis in the United States right now. There are people who want to radically change our form of government as part of living in a democracy, okay? Everybody's here. So in Athens, there were oligarchs. There were people who believed that the democracy should be abolished and an oligarchy set up. People who were smart and rich should be running the country. And so they staged a revolution in Athens. Okay? Totally overthrew the government. The problem was the Athenian fleet, when this happened, was away trying to bring home some money from the island of Samos. Okay? The fleet heard about this revolution in Athens, but they refused to recognize the new government. They were Democrats through and through. Moreover, they had heard that Alcibiades had recently left Sparta over some seedy conspiracy about him and the Spartan queen, and had recently taken up residence in Persia. So they put out word that they needed a new leader. And who comes along but Alcibiades? He shows up, takes charge of the fleet at Samos, sails back, and begins to sail around the Aegean, okay, winning all of these huge victories. And so he meets the Spartans at Cyzicus in 410 and totally wins. And for the next 5 years, okay, Alcibiades is winning naval battle after naval battle, basically never going back to Athens because he knows there he is persona non grata, but out in the ocean, everybody loves him. Okay, so they're all following his lead, and he's showing again his incredible prowess as a military commander. Why then, with all the success, with this resurgence, Alcibiades' leadership, the rebuilt navy, the democracy even recovers after that revolution, why did they fall? Glad you asked. First thing has to do with the appointment of an able and talented commander of the Spartans named Lysander. He had no royal standing, but he, like others before him, okay, had a brilliant mind, especially when it came to naval battle. So he was put in charge of the fleet and was sent out to go and contend with Athens in the water. But here's what makes him so special. He was also a brilliant diplomat. He knew how to go to Sparta, to do the negotiating, and to get the ships that they needed to basically sail a fleet that could contend with Athens, okay, who had by this time been rebuilding and restocking their supply. Now, Alcibiades' string of successes comes to an end at the Battle of Notium. Due to no fault of his own, one of his commanders actually directly disobeyed his orders. He had left the line for a while and said, "Don't attack, whatever you do, don't attack." Lysander had been sitting there with his ships and the Spartans in this narrow little confine, and one of Alcibiades' men just can't take it anymore and launches in and has this big attack, and the Athenians are totally defeated. So because of this mistake, okay, the assembly in Athens actually votes to exile Alcibiades again, okay, and now he's once more an outlaw in Athens. Not that that's ever mattered very much to him, but he is once again kind of exiled and considered, he's told to leave, and he has to quit running the naval fleet, which I guess at this point they kind of went with the orders of the democracy. So another battle comes up in Arginusae the same year, very close to Notium. Athens recovers after the defeat at Notium, and they fight the Spartans again at Arginusae. At this time, they sink over 70 of the Spartan ships, and they lose only 25 of their own, but something very strange happens. In the midst of this fighting, okay, there was a time when some of the Athenian ships had been badly damaged and were sinking, and the men inside of them were easy prey for other Spartan vessels to come through and attack. And the generals in charge of the fleet at this point decided that the best thing to do was to retreat, to kind of regroup, and then to come at it again, which meant leaving several of the Athenian ships and the men in them exposed. Well, they chose to do this. And it was a good thing because they were able, by doing this, to reform their lines and to attack again and again, like I said, defeat the Spartans. However, when they returned home in one of the most collectively sadistic acts in history, the assembly at Athens voted to condemn all of the men to death for having betrayed their comrades in the midst of battle. Now, not all of these guys returned home, but in the end, several of them were executed for winning a battle at Arginusae. Go figure. Last battle of this entire war is Aegis Potami. Lysander, who was feeling pretty confident at this point, took advantage of the turmoil in Athens, the turmoil that had been caused by the condemnation of these generals, and he set a blockade at the Hellespont. Now that's important because the Hellespont gives access to the Black Sea, where there are many Athenian colonies and a lot of money to be made. So now the Spartans have cut off the lucrative silver mines in Attica and one of the most profitable trading routes in the Aegean. The Athenians have no choice. These are their only sources of money. They have to fight one or the other. Rather than risking it on land, they decide to face the Spartans once more at sea, hoping that the odds would be in their favor. According to legend, Alcibiades by this time was actually hanging out in Thrace, which, if you're looking at the map there, would be just kind of up on the north shore there of the Aegean. And he heard that this showdown was about to take place and brought some of his men down to watch. And he was kind of a rogue warlord at this point, just kind of going where he could, making money however. And he came down and he spotted these. He spotted the Athenians who were camped out on a beachhead, and he said to them essentially, "You guys had better, get up and be ready because probably Lysander is gonna attack you at night. And if you're just sitting around here lounging around, eating and drinking, being merry, you're not gonna be ready for him." And the Athenians kind of gave him some smart aleck answer and continued on with their R&R on the beachfront. And sure enough, that very night, according to one story at least, Lysander attacked and destroyed almost all that was left of the Athenian navy. 168 ships were knocked down, and the Spartans then immediately went to the city, laid siege to the city, cut off, of course, now the long walls. They had the power to stop the Athenians from getting to the port. So the Athenians were locked inside their city. They held out for about a year, starving, many of them starving to death. But in 404, the Athenians finally surrender. So here's what happens. Corinth and Thebes wanted to destroy Athens entirely. They just thought, let's just burn the place to the ground, make it a dust heap. No one will want to live there. If anybody wants to, they can start from scratch. But we need to destroy them. Sparta did not want to do it, surprisingly. They had too much respect for Athens, and they said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to strip Athens of all their tributary alliances. They totally broke up the empire. Athens has no alliance now, has no source of money from outside states. They utterly destroyed its navy and pulled down all its walls and set up a government, an oligarchic system called the 30 Tyrants. Now, these leaders were pretty awful people, and they had a long black list of people that they wanted to take care of. These were the same people who had probably staged the revolt back just before the Battle of Notium, when Alcibiades had kind of regained some footing with the navy. These guys were vindictive and mean, and they basically enacted a reign of terror. It was short-lived. They were overthrown just a few years after they were instated. But interestingly, one of those tyrants happened to be a young student of a famous philosopher named Socrates. His name was Critias. He was one of the tyrants, and partly because of his associations with this young tyrant, and partly just because of the sorts of things that he taught that Athenians didn't like at all, Socrates was put on trial for two things: corrupting the youth and denying the gods of Athens. Everybody knew that in large part he was hated because of his association with these 30 tyrants, but those were his official charges. He was found guilty by a narrow margin and was forced to drink hemlock, judicial suicide, and that year was 399 BC. And that's the end of our lecture on the Peloponnesian War. I'll see you tomorrow.